Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 30 of the podcast, Jump Into Success. Alrighty, let's get going. Alrighty, here we are, episode 30. Wow, they're really beginning to rack up, 30 already. It only seems the other day that we started doing this, but we're 30 episodes in. And once again, I want to thank everybody for their support and the positive feedback that we get. It really, really is appreciated. And it encourages us to, stretch and do a little bit more and get some more great guests. Which, talking of great guests, we've got another one today. We've got a fantastic guest today, Mr. Paul Cartwright. Now, he's got a very, very interesting and quite a personal story to tell. And I think it's one of recognizing one's strengths and weaknesses and doing something about it and using one's life experience to help others in a really useful and powerful way. It's a very, very powerful story. So I think you're going to enjoy this, Mr. Paul Cartwright. And let me introduce you to him straight away. So, as I say, a big warm welcome to our special guest today, which is Paul Cartwright. Now, Paul, I have to say, looking at your LinkedIn profile, it's like, wow, this guy does a lot of things and he's got a very, very interesting background. So, men's health, NLP practitioner and trainer, coach, public speaker. And I noticed this morning that you speak French and Spanish at a fairly good level as well, which sounds pretty exciting. So for those of us who don't know a lot about you, who are you, what do you do, and just tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much for inviting me on, Tony. It's a real pleasure to meet you, to be able to talk today. So yeah, a bit about myself. Like you've kind of alluded to, I wear many hats. Just to give people a bit of an idea of my, I suppose, career and background. I have for the past, the number gets bigger every time I say it now. I think about 17 years, I've worked as a major donor fundraiser as well. So, which basically means I've worked for a number of charities asking very rich people for money. That's basically what that is.
Wrapping your chin under some rich nose.
Yeah, well, you get there. Yeah, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to the chuggers. I build relationships with very high net worth individuals and ask them for very large financial gifts for charities. So alongside running Mantra at the moment, I also work for the children's charity Barnardo's. That's been my kind of career and background for the last 17 odd years. And where, we can go into it if you'd like to, the whole NLP thing has come in very handy, just in terms of building rapport, understanding people's communication preferences, understanding the drivers for people's philanthropy. It's come in really, really handy. So that's kind of my career and background. But in 2012, and also this is related to the mental health aspect. I've always, I suppose, lived with depression. I've always, I don't really remember a time when it maybe hasn't been a thing. And back in 2012, it's always something, that I've had to be aware of, that I've had to work at. Back in 2012, again, I was working in a major fundraising job. I was horribly depressed. I hated my job. I was working for a particular organization where it wasn't going particularly well. And I ended up resigning with nothing else to go to. And I was that unhappy. And it was the only time I'd ever done it. And I remember going home that day and I remember sitting in the living room looking out the window and I thought, God, what are you going to do? And, I didn't have a job, but I did have time. And I'd always thought about training and coaching as a career or as something that I wanted to do. And so I thought, you know what, like I say, I've got the time now, I'll have a look around. And I remember seeing this, free weekend of NLP training. So I thought, oh, I wonder what that is. I'd heard about NLP, didn't really know what it was. And so I went along and I just remember thinking, this is amazing. It was really at that point to understand more about self, how my own mind was working, my thought processes, related to the mental health side of things. But I loved it so much, I ended up signing up with these guys. I became an NLP practitioner and then a master practitioner. And then I think in 2014, I became an NLP trainer. And what I then did in becoming an NLP trainer was I brought the NLP tools and techniques to the world of major donor fundraising. So kind of marrying together this newfound skill set with my career. So I set up my own business, as I say, which was NLP training for major donor fundraising teams. And so I worked with lots of big national charities, bringing NLP to their fundraising teams. So running workshops, working one-to-one with fundraisers, doing a lot of public speaking, conferences. I even set up a 2-day workshop called Donate, which was how to do major donor fundraising using NLP. And did that for a few years. And then, quite a few years actually. And then whilst I was doing that, I actually ended up working with another NLP trainer. And together we started offering the certified NLP training courses. So where we could certify NLP practitioners and master practitioners. And what we then did was set up our own new business together, myself and this other NLP trainer, just to add in something on the kind of the timeline here, the chronological order of events. Around this point, I took the decision to move to Thailand. This was towards the end of 2018.
Wow.
It was a kind of, escape the rat race, go and live in paradise, laptop on your lap, looking out at the sea.
Digital nomad dream type thing.
Exactly, yeah. And that was the beginning of 2019. I did that. And the plan was to go over there, live the dream. What actually happened was I ended up flying to Thailand and I had a full-on dark night of the soul, world drops from underneath your feet breakdown. I think looking back now, I was probably running away from stuff that I had to deal with. And what better way to do that than to fly halfway around the world and completely isolate yourself from everybody that
why not?
Looking back, it was probably the worst thing I could have done. So I ended up going over there. It was awful. I wasn't eating properly. I was isolated. I was, like I say, miles from friends and family. So I ended up coming back from Thailand, and there's a group of people waiting to meet me at the airport, and one of those was my mom, and she took one look at me when I got back and she said, I think you need to stay here for a while. She could tell, I was horribly, I lost loads of weight. She could just tell, she said it was like a different person. And so that was kind of middle 2019. But at this time, I'd still set up this new business with the other NLP trainer. And what I did was, and again, this relates to the whole men's mental health, being a man and thinking there needs to be this, achieving success and presenting to the world in the right way and everything's fine, kind of not dealing with your stuff. Yeah. And true to form, I carried on with this new business and didn't deal with it. And so we carried on, and then, as we know, beginning of 2020, COVID hit. So I found myself at the beginning of 2020 then having, trying to get this new business off the ground. I'm having a breakdown, and we have this global pandemic, which, as we know, when you've got a business that relies on face-to-face training and coaching, it was a nightmare. So, excuse me, that's my dog in the background. Give me a second. Sorry about that. And so I lasted doing that for, I think it was about 18 months, maybe 2 years, and in the end I just ended up stepping away from that and taking some time to actually properly get better. And then after that, really, I went back into fundraising just for a bit of kind of stability. I knew what I was doing, salary, and just kind of getting myself back on a bit of a level. And whilst doing that, I thought, you know what, there's probably something I can take from all of this. The breakdown, having the NLP tools and techniques available, the prevalence of more men's mental health, being spoken about, and it becoming more of a topic that's, I suppose, more visible now. And so, yeah, then decided to create Mantra. And the idea with Mantra is to bring all of this together: men's mental health, men's personal development, NLP training. And really the purpose, I suppose, for Mantra is I want us as men to be able to do and to be better. I think that men still hold, disproportionately these positions of power, this ability to affect the world. And I think that we can do that in a better way. And by that, I mean, I think there's still too many men who are uncomfortable dealing with their stuff, who aren't dealing with their issues, or maybe dealing with them in the wrong ways. So maybe, drugs or drink or overwork or anger. And so the idea is to provide I suppose, an experience is what I'm doing with Mantra, to look at this and to provide them with these NLP tools and techniques to be able for them to investigate stuff like, their values, their sense of self, their purpose, their limiting beliefs, their behaviors that are maybe not serving them and others. So that's it. Yeah. That's
wow, what a story. Thank you for being so honest and open, because that's a powerful story and a great testament, I guess, to your character being so strong to deal with all of that. I mean, it sounds like a fairly intense period of time to go through. I'm interested in the support for mental health for men, and for several reasons. One, I am one, but I've always had that interest because over the years it's become very, very clear, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse, that the suicide rate in young men is just absolutely horrific. And yeah, in one hand, people say, yeah, it's a man's world, and you sort of said that too, decision making. But on the other hand, it isn't, because men's health generally is never given the same priority as kids or women, as an example, or so at least it seems. And at least 3 or 4 of my colleagues have always wanted to or do work in that mental health space for men. And, to say that on one hand, they're successful in what they do, but on the other hand, when I talk to them, I feel their frustration that it's almost like people go, yeah, there is a problem. I'm not sure we should talk about it. It just seems like a cultural thing that we still haven't smashed through.
Yeah, it's a really, really fascinating area. And there are so many parts to it which either we don't have answers to yet, or in fact, I'm not entirely sure how we get to an answer. So the thing with men's mental health that you touch on, and the relevance it's given, I think the problem that we have is that for so long, men have enjoyed or seemed to be enjoying, being at the kind of apex of society, as in, we earn more, positions of power, historically, for example, in terms of childcare, there's certain stuff that we're seen as, women do that. And so men have enjoyed almost this position of privilege, I suppose. And so I think what happens is when we look at, we choose to focus on stuff like men's mental health, there may be some pushback by going, well, why are we just focusing on men? And also men for so long, have had this privilege, I suppose, like I say, earning more, for example. But it's not a zero-sum game. I don't think it should be, well, if we focus on, for example, men's mental health, it has to be at the detriment of children's mental health or women's mental health. I think it's as equally a thing, an agenda item to be discussing as everything else. I would argue that it is not more important. It is as equally important as anything else, because, as I say, I think as men, we disproportionately have the ability to affect so much that happens in the world. Like I say, if we just look at, people in positions of power, leaders across the world, they are vastly occupied by men. And therefore, my whole thing with Mantra is to say, if we are seeing men who aren't resolving stuff that's going on for them, climbing ladders and occupying these positions where they can influence so much, be it a manager at work or a world leader, or even a position of, a father, you have this impact not just on what it is that you're doing for yourself, but so many other people as well, be it your children, your employees, your colleagues, your nation, if you're a leader. And so I think there's a real necessary, an urgency to address, men and this unresolved stuff that may be going on for them. I think as well, linked to this is this idea of what it is to be a man and masculinity, because I think there is still so much that is, which we can term toxic masculinity, these traits which we ascribe to idea of man, which unless you do this, are you really a man? This achieve success and power and wealth and influence and, get ahead as much as you can because that's what you're meant to do as a man. And I think there's real elements there that need to be reviewed, because I think what they tend to do is drive men there to act in certain ways which are not necessarily beneficial for themselves, but also as well, probably more importantly, or equally as important, for other people as well. So I think there's a whole, it opens up a whole question around this idea of masculinity. I was talking on another podcast recently whereby I was reading a guy called JJ Boller. He's an author and a writer, and he talks about this concept of masculinity being a plurality. So not just this umbrella term of this is masculinity, and if you're a man, you have to sit under this umbrella. He talks about this concept of masculinity being like a plurality. So what's the masculinity that works for you as an individual man? And I think that concept in itself enables us to discuss more about traits that maybe haven't been seen historically as male traits. So empathy, understanding, vulnerability, care and compassion. I think, it's a really fascinating area. There's a really interesting article, if your listeners want to go and have a look at it. It's called Men Are Lost. Here's a map out of the wilderness. I think the author's called Christine Ember. It's a piece for the Washington Post. It's quite a long piece, but it perfectly looks at the problems we have in defining what it is to be a man and what it is to be a good man. She talks about, for example, the rise of people like Andrew Tate, who the interesting thing with Andrew Tate, and I vehemently disagree with him and what he says about being a man and masculinity. In this article, she talks about his stuff basically being misogyny masquerading as masculinity, which I think is a perfect way of putting it. But what the interesting thing with Andrew Tate is, if you take away all of the awful stuff he says about women, about how to treat women, the interesting thing that we can pinpoint is he's almost countercultural because he dares to define what masculinity is. He puts his hand up and says, this is what it is to be a man. Now, as I say, strip away everything he actually says, the fact that he just gives men a guide, a flag in the sand to say, this is what it is. As human beings, we are always drawn to somebody explicitly telling us what a thing is, regardless as to whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a huge area, and one which I don't have that many answers for at the moment.
No, but I think it's interesting because if he felt he could and then did and got the audience to say this is what it is to be a man, and then you get a lot of people who are interested in the idea. Is that right? Well, yeah, that sounds interesting. Tells me that there's a lot of men looking for that signal or that message, and feel a bit lost in life. Who am I? What does it mean to be a man? should I express myself? How do I treat my female friends and relations? So there is that kind of, it's missing somewhere in the education system. I don't know.
It is.
It's very odd.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. The fact that he is so successful, for want of a better phrase, in what he does, says that there's something missing at the front end, that people go looking and go, oh, that's an answer to the question I'm either unconsciously or consciously asking, which is kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now then, let's go back a bit. How do you end up being a fundraiser for large organizations and tapping on the shoulders of rich people? How did you get into that? How did that start?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The honest answer is I fell into it.
Like all these things, we fell into it.
I absolutely fell into it. I was working for a media company, like I say, 17, 18 years ago. And I was not very happy there. And one of my colleagues, her best friend was a major donor manager at an organizer, a charity. And she said, oh, he's recruiting and I think you'd love it. And I said, oh, what is it he does? She says, oh, he basically asks rich people for money for charity. And I just thought, why don't I give it a go? And so I applied, and I got the job. I think behind it, though, that is the reality of how it happened. But I think if I look at more kind of an unconscious level, I think there was a real drive, and which was missing at that time, to do something that felt purposeful, to make a bit of a difference. I'd been working in media, and I just thought most of it was nonsense. I just thought, what am I doing? And that's not to take anything away from people that work in media. You do what you want, but for me, I just thought, I don't really get this. And I suppose to go and to work for an organisation where essentially, you're doing a good thing. You're helping people with whatever cause it may be that I was working for. So I fell into it.
Well, that sounds pretty interesting. Yeah. I mean, as a fellow NLP trainer, I always say I fell into this by more accident than by design. And it kind of, working in the corporate space, got sent in a training course, thought there's something interesting underneath this stuff that we're learning, and then asked the question, is there underlying philosophy here? And they're kind of hiding, it's a sort of NLP. Sorry? I thought, you've never heard of that. This is a long, long time ago, 30 years ago. NLP, what is that? And then became interested and realized that there's this whole philosophy of the way of thinking and of creating success. And I just straight away took to it like a duck to water. And a bit like yourself, I thought I can use this in lots of different ways. A, for myself, which was the first, open heart surgery on myself type of thing. There's a lot of things I can fix about myself. And personal and professional improvement. But we used the tools and the models of communication and goal setting. In the company I worked for, we went from doing not so great to doing super, super well. I mean, it was, you can see the transformation probably in a graph, which led us to setting up UKCPD, and the rest is history, as they say. So go back to your program with Mantra. Is it like a one-to-one thing, or is it group things that you do?
So I do work one-to-one with people, but the main, the thing that Mantra is essentially a 6-day NLP course. So it's an NLP practitioner course, and the brand is Mantra. So what I do is it's 6 days split over 3 days and then 3 days. And essentially what I do is introduce the men that come on the course to all of the NLP tools and techniques up to practitioner level. But what makes Mantra different to just say a standard NLP practitioner course is it's focused on men. Obviously it's set with the context of men's mental health in the background. Not, it doesn't have to be a thing for people that come on the course. But as I say, back in 2012, I went on the first NLP course with my own mental health as a kind of, I wonder if this can help in the background, and it certainly did. Personal development, mental health. So there's lots of kind of contextual stuff behind this. But the idea with Mantra is every letter of Mantra stands for a thematic area that we cover in the 6 days. So the thematic areas are mission, autonomy, neurohacking, transformation, respect, and agency. So these are all areas that, from talking to men through doing mantra, through setting up mantra, these are all areas that have always kind of flashed up these are the areas that most men want to do better with, or are struggling with, or want to personally develop within these areas. So just to give you an example, some of the mission is all about purpose. A lot of guys that I talk to, I'm 44, the whole breakdown for me, a lot of that was related to where am I going, what am I doing, what's the the meaning of being here, kind of thing. And I think a lot of guys, when they get to a certain age, usually around 40s, maybe they've been in a career for 20 years and they think, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not enjoying it. I'm climbing a ladder that I never really wanted to start climbing. So there's a real look at purpose and mission there. The idea with neurohacking obviously is all about essentially the essence of NLP, looking at how we process information, how it affects behavior, especially in terms of outcomes, especially if we're not getting the outcomes that we've wanted so far. The idea with agency and autonomy really relates to operating for and from self, because I think a lot of guys feel that is really missing in their lives, especially if you're married, you've got kids, you've got a job. There's a real vacuum in there of actually, where do I sit in this? What am I doing? What is it that I want to do? And the whole respect thing as well. I think a lot of times, and I know this from my own personal experience, self-respect was really lacking for a really long period. And that, I think, contributed to this almost destructive behavior pre-breakdown. Because if there's no respect for self, or if your self-esteem is so low, then what does it matter? If you don't really care for self, then I think that creates real problems. But the respect thing, the R of mantra, also relates not just to self-respect, but respect for others. And that's what I was talking about before with, if you are a leader, if you are a dad, if you are a partner, there's impact that your actions and behaviors have if you aren't sorting your stuff out. And so this whole experience is really putting all of that together. So mantra, as I say, those 6 areas, we introduce NLP tools and techniques which are focused on those particular themes. And the idea is that we dive deep into what's going on for you, and to give you tools and techniques for you to take forward to go and do whatever you want. Live a great life, start a new business, do better in your current business. Think about what it is that you want to do differently.
Sounds fantastic. I have to say, I'm very impressed. I always think about, when people are hurting themselves for a lack of self-respect, it's kind of like go back to the 4 pillars of NLP. They're out of rapport with themselves, never mind everybody else.
Absolutely.
And their outcome isn't very clear about where I'm going. There's confusion, which is what's enabling this festering pain and sort of uncomfortableness in one's own skin. And there's no sense of flexibility or control about where they're going. And that acuity is skewed. It's skewed. But once you get those things lined up, you become more solid and grounded, and your personal and professional outlook changes, because you think, actually, I'm okay. I now know where I'm going. I feel more comfortable in my skin. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. I really applaud it. I really, really do. And more of that, please, to help more people. Now then, we got some questions that we ask everybody. So, favorite personal development book?
Do you know what? I'm one of those terrible people. I've got probably about 3,000 books on the bookshelf, and I never get around to reading them. But there are certain ones that. Do you know one book that I really enjoyed, and maybe people wouldn't associate this with personal development, but I don't know if you've heard of the book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It's essentially the journey of how Buddha becomes to be, and I just found it so. It's basically for me this book of. This guy leaves his home, and it's essentially a journey of struggle and change and letting go and developing and becoming. And in the end, the guy becomes Buddha. And I don't know, for me, it's just such a beautiful story of, I think, everything that is needed to bring about the outcome and the change that you want to see. You know, and along the way, it is real. There can be real pain. There can be real change. There can be real struggle. You know, it's not difficult. There can be real, you know, moments of beauty as well. But for me, yeah, Siddhartha is such a lovely book that it just, I don't know, it really resonated with me on a level because of, well, I suppose there's lots of stuff about, you know, that journey that I've been through myself as well.
Yeah.
What else is there? Personal development book. Ego is the Enemy. That's another great one as well. Just talking about, you know, the problems that ego can present and how that it can throw up in terms of your progress and again the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. I found that to be really, really useful. And anything by Mark Manson, you know, he's written quite a few books now. I love the way that he writes. I think it's stuff that, you know, there's moments in the book where you just think, oh, what a there's stuff in there, I think, that just really resonated with me. And I'm actually reading a book at the moment called Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's, yeah, I'm just starting to read that now. So that's great, you know, forming new good habits, getting rid of old habits, you know, tacking stuff onto stuff you already do to make the formation of new habits a bit easier. So I've probably given you 4 there when you've asked me for one, but
somebody's busy working on a new book list now. Oh my God, get all these books.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone I've mentioned there's 10 on the shelf that I haven't read yet.
Trust me, I know. I'm sitting here in a library. It's crazy. Now then, given your background, we will ask you this question, depending on our guests. We don't ask this one, but favorite coaching or NLP model?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to tell you one because there's a story associated with it and I'll keep it short. So I'm talking about what's called the anxiety model, which I never understand why they call it the anxiety model, because the whole idea is to remove anxiety. So why would you call the model the anxiety model? But the idea, essentially, you know, timeline based, going to the future, looking back at, you know, the positive outcome that you wish to achieve as if it has already happened. I use that technique just before I moved to Brazil in 2009. And about a few months before I moved there, I thought, I don't have enough money. So how can I quickly get some money together? Because I'm leaving for Brazil to move to Rio in 3 months and I haven't saved enough. And I use this technique to win a game show. I thought, right, how can I get money quickly? So as any sane person would,
What a game show.
And I say it back now, I think, what a kind of maniac I must have been. And I thought, oh, I reckon I could, you know, I applied to go on a game show and I'll win that. And I applied to this game show. It was on Channel 5. It was called Wordplay. I mean, it was daytime Channel 5. So, you know, the jackpot was like £1,800. But I used this technique. I imagined a time in the future, looking back at myself on the beach in Brazil, talking to my friend about the process of what happened to me to win that game show. And I went on it and I won it. Yeah.
Well, that sounds very Tad James, I have to say. Going into the future now. Looking back down your timeline.
Yeah, I think anything timeline based. I worked with a client recently to, you know, whereas that was going to the future, looking back at, you know, having won the game show. I worked with a guy recently going back to, you know, the formation of fear for him and the release of that. And he said it was, you know, he actually said it was one of the most powerful sessions he's ever had. You know, just this ability to release that fear that you've built up or you've created at some point down that timeline. So yeah, I think anything timeline based for me is hugely powerful. Yeah. I also love neurological levels as well.
Oh, that's my favorite thing in the whole world. I mean, Robert. I refer to Robert as a friend in a way. I mean, we've done so much work together. And he's been so supportive of the college over the years. But that one thing, I remember being in the training room 30 years ago, and that being explained to me, and like not just the penny dropping, but the lights going, wake up, this is it. What level do you need to change things to change your life around?
Yeah.
Just absolutely.
It's so simple, right? Just so simple.
So simple, but yet such complex applications just in every, you know, business, life, and coaching and development work. I introduced neurological levels when I was working with fundraisers, and I said to them, think of your
major donors, so the people who are giving these large gifts to your charity, think of your major donors as VIPs, not very important people, they are, but think about what are their values and are they being fulfilled when you're talking to them about supporting your charity? What's their sense of identity, as in what kind of a philanthropist are they? How do they see themselves as somebody who gives money away? And what's the purpose? Why do they give money away generally? Why are they going to give money to your charity? And I created a whole major donor focused, I suppose, concept with VIP. Yeah. And that was from neurological levels.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right. We're coming up to the last question here. Favorite motivational or inspirational quote, if in fact you have one?
I've got a couple, and they are NLP based, I'm afraid. There's a couple. I love in NLP we call it presupposition. No failure, only feedback. When I set up the NLP company for fundraising teams, I wrote a book, and it's only because of that saying, no failure, any feedback, that I wrote the book. I remember sitting there thinking, what if people hate this? What should I put on the front cover? What if, I don't know, what if this flops? It was 40 pages long. It was no War and Peace. It was just to give away for free to raise awareness of the business. But I remember sitting there almost paralyzed, thinking, God, what if people hate this? And then I thought, well, actually, if there's no failure, only feedback, then I can't fail with this. And I just see what people think, and that enabled me to write this book. And the other one that I really love is, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Again, so simple, but the amount of people who I coach and I talk to, and I say, if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to continue to get the same results. And I love it. Again, it's sometimes, as we said, with neurological levels, it's the simplest things that sometimes create the most transformational results.
I got to tell you, that's beautiful, because those two presuppositions are the two things that changed my life. And some people, I say that to people sometimes, it's almost like they don't believe me. I said, no, you've got to understand, I was quite shy. I wasn't particularly ambitious. I was in a job, and I was kind of like, I wanted to do something that I didn't know what it was, and I was afraid to do anything, and certainly afraid to leave my safe corporate job that paid me money and paid a pension and all these things. I want to do something. But those two things, they entered into my head like a thought virus, but in a good way, and completely gave me the courage and the confidence to go, even if it goes tits up, so what? Yeah. It'll just be learning. It's just learning. It's feedback, and you can always pick yourself up and have another go. So I love the fact that you did that. One of my favorite quotes is the Mandela one. It's it's always impossible until it's done. And I always think that, and the two that you just said, they fit together so perfectly, because they begin to form a philosophy. This is how I operate. Yeah. And that's how we built the college. And it sounds like, to me, that's been a kind of a guide for yourself as well, which is really, really good. Now then, Paul, how do people want to get hold of you if they want to know more and they want to get involved in Mantra? How do they get involved? How do they get in touch?
Yeah, so we're currently having the website rebuilt, so I can't direct people to the website at the moment. But what I would say is the best way to contact me is on LinkedIn. My name's Paul Cartwright. I think my handle on LinkedIn is Paul Cartwright Mantra, or if you put in Paul Cartwright Mantra, you'll see a picture of me. So feel free to connect with me on there. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you, especially if there's anything you've heard, today that you found particularly interesting, or if there's anything else that you'd like to know about me or Mantra, then I'm always up for a chat, and feel free to connect.
Fantastic. Paul, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on, and you'll have to let us know. Well, let's have you back again in a couple of years and see how Mantras and how many lives that's changed, because I have a feeling it'll be quite substantive, because it sounds like a great message, a great methodology, and I get the real sense you're coming from a place that's really, really great. So thanks very much.
Fabulous. Well, Tony, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, and best of luck to you as well.
Likewise, my friend. You take care.
Thanks, Tony.
So there you go. I'm sure you'll agree. Fantastic guest that we've had on there. And all these links you can find in the show notes. Be sure to check Paul out. Really, really great guy. I was really inspired by his story and what he's doing to make a difference in the world, which, that's what UKCPD is all about. That sort of mantra of building a world that people want to belong, that we sort of borrowed from our friend and colleague, Robert Dilts. Okay, that's it for this week. Be sure to subscribe because we've got lots more really cool guests coming up, and I will catch you guys on the next podcast. Till then, keep on smiling. Bye for now.